Some people have, a couple subscribers have asked me to give an overview of my car after some drag racing videos I posted. As you can see, it's a 1981 Chevy Camaro, not a Z28. I originally thought it was a Berlinetta, but it turns out the car is registered as a Camaro Sport Coupe, the lowest grade you can get. Matter of fact, this one came with a V6. I'm not 100% sure of what size. I'd have to look at my build sheet, which luckily I had. So I got this from my buddy as a roller. He owed me a few $100. I kept seeing this car out at his house on a trailer just sitting there. So I inquired about it. I said, hey bud, you rather just trade me the title for that car instead of paying me the money you owed me? And like any guy that has a car just sitting around that he plans on doing nothing with, he accepted. So here we have it. In its first iteration, I built this as a carbureted car with a carbureted 5.3 and a original Super T10 4-speed. This was originally an automatic car, so when I put the 4-speed in, obviously I had to put all the pedals and everything in and cut out the console area. So I know most people are probably interested what's under the hood, so let's go ahead and take a look there. Originally I had an iron block 5.3 and LM7. Those are 9.4 to 1 compression ratio, coming, you know, all the normal trucks, Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, you know, the list goes on and on. But I discovered a guy in Craigslist who had an aluminum 5.3 for sale, saying it had bad oil pressure. So he yanked that out and put in a different engine, and being an engineer, the lower weight piqued my interest. Overall, if you use an aluminum block LS, you're saving around 100 pounds off the nose of the car, which, you know, is pretty significant. You wouldn't believe how much faster a car can go just by losing weight rather than adding power. So I got a hold of this L33, as it's called. It's a high output version 5.3. Came in some Silverado Z71s, Buick Rainiers, some higher level GMC Sierras. It's definitely a good motor. What's interesting about it is it has Gen 4 rotating assembly, where regular 5.3s have the older Gen 3, the older Chevy motors, you know, the early 2000s. This has better rods. It has flat top pistons, almost 10 to 1 compression ratio. It has coated piston skirts, full floating rods, so it was definitely a better option to go with. It also has the higher flowing 799 or 243, commonly referred to as LS6 heads. They have bigger ports, bigger valves. These were seen on the later truck motors, I think after 07, as well as the LS2 in the GTO, and the LS6 Z06 C5. I think that was 02 to 04. So the basic build plan for this engine was just to get it up and running. I originally had put it together when I was in college, so funds were tight. So I regretfully didn't put a cam in it. However, I did replace the original L33 cam, although it's a little bit hotter than an original LM7 5.3. Had a little bit more lift, but I pulled that out and I put in a stock C5 Corvette cam that I had laying around, which gave it a little bit more duration, a little bit more lift. Still extremely tame. I'm looking to swap that cam out along with some other build plans I have for this winter, which I'll describe in another video. As you can see here, I have a turbo setup based on the stock truck manifolds, which I flipped upside down and faced forward. And then what I did is I bought some flanges and I fabbed up the hot side with some tubing from mandrellbenz.com. They have really good prices. I'd never TIG welded before I built this, so for not ever TIG welding, let's see if I can get a shot of this weld, I don't think I did too bad. You know, it definitely isn't professional by any means, but hasn't leaked yet, so I'm happy about that. What I have mounted here, I have a 2 1/4 inch hot side. I wanted to make it a little bit smaller than the common 2 1/2 everybody uses. That way we could get as quick spooling on the turbo as possible. The turbo is a CXracing T76 with the 76mm compressor and the small 65mm turbine. This results in quick spooling. I spool right under 3,000 RPM, so it's fun on the street, especially in a manual where every time you shift you're losing boost basically. I have a precision turbo, PW 46mm wastegate. I didn't want to go with a cheaper wastegate because I wanted to make sure we could control the boost and let the motor live. Then I also have a Turbo Smart, I believe that is a 50mm race port. And then I have 2 1/2 inch cold side. If you see in the front here, I have a cheap CXracing 2 1/2 inch intercooler, air to air. Does a pretty good job. I usually see intake air temps in the 70s, even in the summer, so that's pretty great. I use the stock truck accessories. You can see everything's packed in there pretty tight. Now, a mistake on my part, when I mounted the turbo, being the first turbo I've ever dealt with, I mounted it in a way, I wanted to keep the inner fenders. That was one of my biggest goals. So I didn't have a whole lot of space, so I ended up with the turbo in this orientation, which is much different than other people's. Usually they'll have the exit from the turbine facing to the back so you can run an exhaust system out the back. What I did was mounted it so it's real close up here where the battery used to be, which has been relocated to the trunk. And then I have basically, I think it's a 26 inch overall, 3 inch dump right out here below the fender. Thought about cutting the fender, still on the fence about that, may change it. But, you know, it's not very loud for having no mufflers and no exhaust system. The turbo does a pretty good job of being a muffler. And then for timing, I'm using an MSD box that carried over. This is the 6010 6LS. That carried over from the carbureted days. The 6010 MSD controls timing. You build your own map. I have that ran off a map sensor, so when it was carbureted it could change the timing based on manifold pressure. So after I went carbureted, I moved to a Fitech, one of the newer self-learning fuel injection setups. I originally was running it naturally aspirated, then I sold that naturally aspirated unit and got a power adder unit. This is the 600 model. It's being fed by a Summit 385 liter per hour fuel pump inline. Pretty sure that's the same fuel pump as AEM, as I don't think Summit makes their own parts. They usually just rebrand stuff and sell it cheaper. So that's been working out pretty good. Running dash 6 fuel line in return with a pressure gauge in there. You can see I got my manifold here for vacuum, which I run out to the blow-off valve. And then I was originally running just the wastegate with a 10-pound spring, but then I added a Turbo Smart cheapy T boost controller. So I'm seeing about 14 to 16 pounds of boost right now. It's pretty awesome. Now I have a 4th generation Camaro with an automatic, so definitely in this car I wanted to do a manual. As I said, originally it had the regular Borg Warner Super T10, and then what I did was, once I put the turbo in, I was worried about it being able to handle, you know, the torque that a turbo can put out. You know, at 14-15 pounds of boost, it's probably making at least in the mid 400s. I haven't had done it yet. Looking forward to doing that. So what I did was I swapped that out for a Tremec TKO600 5-speed. This makes life so much better, being able to go into 5th gear, especially with 373s in the back. Originally I had 273s, and that was good for the Super T10, but it has such a high first gear that when I put in 373s, first gear was basically worthless. I could start out in second gear and first gear ended at 15 miles an hour. So the gear ratios are a lot better in this transmission, a lot stronger transmission. I'll go over the how I attach the clutch and everything in another video. That's something a little bit different when you're doing an old school transmission compared mocked up to an LS engine. You got to do a couple tricky things. I've kept the stock manual clutch linkage. A lot of people just go hydraulic, but at the time when I built the car, I wanted to go as cheap as possible, so I did mechanical. And what I did with that is by combining the 5 speeds with the 373s at about 70 miles an hour right now, I am able to do about 2400 RPM, which is super acceptable. On the highway it used to rev over 3 grand, which was pretty terrible. So also on the car, got some nostalgic Radial TAs. Got a 275/60/15, so as you can see, that's pretty meaty. Got some slapper bars on there for traction, and a Chevy 8.5-inch 10-bolt with 373s and Posi. The car was pretty miserable with an open rear end. You'd get stuck in grass and wouldn't be able to move. So, hope you enjoyed the walk around. I'll give you a startup and let you sound it here. So let you hear what it sounds like. The Fitech's so much better than a carburetor. No pumping. All you do, put it in neutral, hit the key, let it prime. Start her up. As I told you, the turbo makes a great muffler. I'm looking forward to putting a turbo cam in here and getting a little bit of chop at idle. So, I'm gonna go for a little drive here, and I'll see you later. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.